Um, let's start with that. Okay. So, um, wait a second. Okay. So I would like to start by thanking you to for being here. Okay, I generally mean that because at an event like Flowtopia, there are many sessions, many ideas, and many different perspectives competing for your attention. So the fact that you choose to be here already means something. Okay, so thank you. I would also like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to take part in this conversation. uh, for me, this topic is very important because Flutopia is not just about improving processes. Okay, it is about something slightly more complex, and in many cases, slightly more uncomfortable. For how we actually make workflow in reorganization, not just in diagrams or presentation. Okay, so. Um, and I say actually, okay, on purpose, because if we stop for a moment and reflect honestly, almost every organization today it's already working on flow. Okay, they all have improvement initiative, optimization programs, transformation roadmaps, and everyone is trying to deliver faster. Everyone, okay, with better quality and more control. Many people try to do this, and yet when you speak to teams in their daily work, the feeling is different. Okay, work get stuck, decision take longer than expected, friction appears everywhere. There is progress, yeah, but it does not feel like flow. You know that. um, I have seen uh, I have seen this across different industries, in more mature and less mature organizations, in both technical and not technical environments. And there is one common pattern. The effort is there every time. The intention is there, but the system does not feel smooth. This is a great problem that I think that we can talking about this today. Okay, so um, when we see this situation, a question appears again and again, okay, and again. uh, why does transformation stall? Why, despite having processes, tools, frameworks, and increasingly sophisticated structures, does the system not flow as we expect? Why? Eternally why? um, and this is not a theoretical question, it's a very practical one because the consequences are clear. um, Projects take longer than expected, decisions take too long, teams are active but not progressing at the pace required, and dependencies appears late and disrupt planning every time. For example, I remember working with an industrial organization where the leadership team genuinely believed they have everything in place. They had investment, they had a roadmap, they had a structure, but the CIO said something very simple. Um, they could not move the organization at the speed they needed. A problem. That sentence explains the problem very clearly. Yeah, um, um, it is not that something obvious is missing. Um, it is that something in the system is not visible enough, or not being addressed properly. Okay, this is a problem that we have at this moment. So um, here comes the first key idea. Okay, the problem is not the processes, or more precisely, uh, it is not mainly the processes. The problem lies in everything that happens between them. Okay, in the way people interact to make those processes work. We tend to analyze. mm, we tend to analyze work structurally. We look at flows, tools, steps, but what happen? What happens between those steps in what really determines whether the system flows? For example, in a telecom company I work with, they have a perfectly defined change management processes. says Patrice, individuals are interactions over processes and to, yeah, every time. This is a great phrase. We have to print this and put in the board, you know. So I told you, in a telecom company I working with, they have a perfectly defined change management process. Everything was documented and looked correct. But in practice, say the problem, but in practice, each team interpreted urgency differently because nobody had agreed what urgent actually meant. You know, for one team, it means immediate action. For another, it means during the day. For another, it means within the week. You know, so um, technically, everyone was right. You know, but operationally, everything was broken. So the process was correct in that example. Yeah, the process was correct. The interaction was not. You know, the interaction was not. What is the problem in this moment? The way that the people try to communicate many things in that sense. Okay, so this, sorry, this leads to something we see very often. Okay, the illusion of efficiency. Okay, from the outside, many organizations looks extremely well structured. Okay, from the outside, they have strong tools, recognized frameworks, clean processes. Everything appears controlled. Okay, say Jack Merhe, say Amen. Yeah, human centric is the magic on both things. Yeah, every time. But the problem is that many people doesn't understand that situation. This is the problem. But yeah, human centric is the magic every time and everywhere. So I recovered that sentence. Okay. They have some tools, recognized frameworks, clean processes. Everything appears controlled. Okay, appears controlled. But when you experience the system from inside, it feels very different. This is a common situation now. Decisions are slower than expected. Dependencies appear late. Conversations become longer than necessary, and teams spend more time aligning or try to align. Okay, that moving forward. That moving forward. Okay, for example, in a financial services company, the operating model looked perfect in presentation. The PowerPoint can support everything. But when we analyze it, how work really happened, sorry, we found that much of the effort was spent on emails, calls, and constant clarifications. So, as you can imagine, at this point, at one point, I remember saying, "Your system is very efficient on PowerPoint." You know, Uh, your system is very efficient, but just on PowerPoint. This is a problem. So in reality, it was far more complex and less efficiency. The PowerPoint, it's okay for many people. I really enjoy the PowerPoint when I have to use that, but the reality is that your processes on your service of your structures uh, just works over the PowerPoint. You will have problems every time. You know that. Okay, so the efficiency was very clear, but just on PowerPoint. Okay, so um, we should, yeah. Measurement is important. Everybody has it's agree with that. We measure, lead time, throughput, cycle time, and many other indicators. This is necessary to manage systems. Okay, but there is a limitation. Sorry. Okay, why? Metrics describe what is happening. That metrics describe what is happening, but not why. Okay, um, they had detailed data showing decision delays. Okay, they knew exactly how long decision took, but they could not explain why. When we analyzed the situation, we found that decision making was highly centralized and escalated unnecessarily. Okay, so in this case, it was almost like every decision needed a second opinion. I'm totally sure that you are living something similar in your company. Okay. Mm, every decision needed a second opinion. Okay, and then a third. You know, just to be safe. Okay, just to be safe is the phrase that many people use. Just to be safe. Okay, so the behavior was not visible in KPIs. Okay, but it was defining the system. Okay, was defining the system. Sorry. So um, we have to talk about it, about two systems in that sense. Okay, so um, this is where a key shift in perspective happens. Okay, and this slide, it's critical for understanding the rest of the talk. Okay, because every organization operates in two systems at the same time. Every organization. Okay, there is a visible system. Okay, which includes the regular, yeah, processes, tools, metrics, and governance structure, and many other things that you are thinking now. Okay, and there is an invisible system too. Okay, which includes language, behaviors, relationships, trust, and the implicit agreements between people. Okay, as Jack says uh, 5 minutes ago. Okay, the people is it's very important in that situations. Okay, says Jack again. The cause of delay, particularly due decision latency as a real drag. Yeah, yeah, totally. That's hidden unless you look. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because if you don't want to see that, you will not found that. Okay, the invisible system. This is Patrice says. The invisible system, or the one we don't want to see exactly, but depends, because when you are a senior professional, usually you suppose that the invisible system exists. But when you are not that senior, usually the invisible system is real invisible. You know that? Yeah, the capacity to see, it's related every time with your experience, or your critical mindset. Depends. No, no, no. Uh, it's not true that everybody can see that with two systems. Okay, so the visible system is the one we design. Okay, this is one explanation in that sense. The visible system is the one we design. It is what we document, what we implement, what we audit. Um, it gives it give us the feeling that the organization is under control. The feeling, okay, the feeling that the organization is under control. The invisible system is the one we live, in every day that you have to spend in the company. Was it? Just now. Wait a second. It starts me thinking of the code. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, the invisible system is the one we live. Okay, it, it is the one that actually determines how people interpret the design, how they behave, how they collaborate, and ultimately how the work flows. You know, it's another perspective. Sorry. For example, um, in a public sector organization I worked with, they had implemented a very well designed internal service portal, very well designed um, internal service portal. Okay, um, it was structured, traceable, aligned with the best practice, many best practice. It was officially the correct way of requesting services. Okay, however. People continue to use email in parallel, not because they dislike the tool or the portal, but because they did not fully trust it. You know? They felt it was slower, less responsive, or less predictable. The people feel, you know, the people feeling, sorry. So even though the visible system was correct, the invisible system dictated behavior, you know? And this is the key idea. The system the system you do not design is the system that defines performance. This is a real problem. Said Patrice, not sure of that. A new person, a junior can see lots of things. Senior people are just not more seeing. Fresh pair of eyes. Yeah, depends. Uh, if we can drive deeper in that concept, maybe we can use a couple of hours for a new debate, because in that sense we have to talk about culture, okay, and not if maybe it's a mistake from my side, okay. It's not about juniors and senior. Maybe it could be the culture or the kind of onboarding that people receive and many other things, okay. It's not true that every fresh pair of eyes will provide uh, many things that you are not seeing at this moment. No, no, it's not true that every time that situation happens. Okay, sharing knowledge, value, and yeah, yeah. So, um, next, sorry, workflow actually breaks. Okay, workflow actually breaks. When we analyze where flow actually breaks, we begin to see patterns that are what's the word surprisingly okay consistent across organization. Okay, these patterns are not technical, you know, they are behavioral. This is a real interesting thing. Okay, they are behavioral. Decisions are not clearly closed. Responsibility is shared but not owned. Expectations are assumed but not explicitly defined. Teams hesitate not because they are not capable, but because they are not sure whether they should act. This is a problem. This situation do not look critical when you analyze them individually, but when they repeat hundreds of thousands of times across the system, they generated a level of friction that becomes structural. And in this moment, the problem appears. For example, in a technology company, we identified that many tasks were blocked and in intermediate stages. Okay, there was not clear failure. The process seemed to be followed. But when we look it closely, okay, we realized that nobody had explicit accountability for closing particular decisions. So everybody assumed someone else will do it. I'm totally sure that you know that situation. Okay, everyone assumed someone else will do it. So it became a very efficient waiting system, but not a very effective one. It became a very efficient waiting system, but not a very effective one. Okay, so and that way, repeated again and again, so slowed down the entire organization. It's a regular situation, sadly. So, culture, yeah. Culture has it. Yeah. This is why we need to rethink how we understand culture. The oh, the culture. Yeah. Not as something abstract or soft. But as an operational system that determines how work is actually executed. Could not agree anymore. We were, okay. Let me explain that. So, um, culture is not what is writing on the wall. Okay, it is not a set of declared values. It is what people actually do when they need to make decisions, solve problems, or coordinate it with others. It defines how responsibility is assumed, how conflict is handled, and how alignment is achieved, and how work move forward under pressure. Under pressure, remember that. For example, in an insurance organization, the main issue was not process design, it was the behavior. Okay, there there was a strong pattern of escalation. People avoided taking responsibility unless explicitly authorized. Okay, that behavior created permanent delays and dependency change, regardless of how good the process design was. Okay, um, when that pattern began to change, the system started to move differently. It's real. It's with a real little situation, many things can change. Okay, so um, the real constraints. Um, this leads us to identify the real constraint of the system. Okay, it's it is not the process itself; it is the human system executing that process. It is the difference between a design works, a design that works in theory, and a system that works in practice. Found it recently. Okay, I will check that. Okay, for example, as I say, no, I have seen organization implementing highly structured processes with a strong governance, that automation and control mechanism, only to see them degrade within months. Okay, why does that happens? Because people reinterpret the process through their existing behaviors. They adapt um, it to what feels natural, not necessarily what was intended. In many cases, organizations automate without the redesigned, okay, scale without validating, and implement without aligning people. Uh, in many cases, okay, many cases, a lot of cases, really. And the result is predictable. The system looks strong, but it does, sorry, not whole. This is a real problem. So, um, three levels of flow. Okay, so um, if we cannot change culture directly, okay, the question becomes, what can we design really? Okay, the answer lies in how work actually happens, um, and that happens through the interactions. Interactions is structured through language, agreements, and rituals too. Okay, language, the language defines how we understand reality, how we interpret urgency, priority, and responsibility. How we understand. Okay, agreements define how we commit. Okay, how we consider closest, what we expect from each other, how we commit. Rituals define how we operate, how decisions are made, how work is reviewed. Okay, define how we operate. So, for example, in a retail organization, we introduce it as simple rule: no meeting could end without a clear decision, a, res- a responsible person, and a date. You know, very very good intentions. At the beginning, people resisted. It felt rigid. It felt unnecessary. Okay, this is two popular words in that kind of situation. After a few weeks, they started asking for it in every meeting. You know, because suddenly things started moving and ambiguity disappeared. It's normal as I told you, with real little changes. Many things can change. Many things can evolve in that sense. Okay, so arte appears here. Okay, so this is where arte it's the methodology that I create. Okay, comes in as a methodology. Okay, here I want to be clear and also very honest in that sense. Okay, arte was not created because the world needed another methodology. Everybody here know that. Okay, we are really have many, a lot. Okay, so it was created after observing again and again, the same patterns in very different organizations. Well designed initiative that failed to change behavior. The goal was to connect what already exists in organizations: strategy, operation, services, people, and behavior in a coherent system. This was the intention. For example, in a multinational organization, applying this approach, helped align teams that had previously worked in complete isolation. Not because we added a new tool, but because we redefine how they interact, okay, how they made decision and how they share in ownership. Okay, arte means adaptative, robust, transversal, and expandable. Okay, and when you want, if you try, when you translate that name to the Spanish word, is the same. Okay, adaptative in Spanish. So okay. Next. Okay. The shift that changed everything. Okay. There is a fundamental shift with this approach. There are two levels where we can intervene in organization. The first level is process optimization. Okay. The second level is behavioral optimization. The majority of transformation efforts focus on the first level. You know that. Um, they improve workflows, define structures, introduce tools, but the real unlocking of flow happens in the second level. You know, for example, in an industrial organization, years of process optimization had limited impact, but when decision ownership was clearly defined and behaviors were aligned, the system started to move much faster. Okay, so one of the most powerful ideas here is that significant impact does not necessarily come from large transformation programs. Okay, it often comes from small, well-designed changes in behavior. For example, in one organization, simply aligning what done, okay, mean across teams eliminated a large amount of rework. Before that, each team its own interpretation of, and work will move forward only to be reopened. Like the example of was I talking about the urgency, you remember? So it was it was quite creative, but not very efficient, you know. So when the ambiguity disappeared, coordination improved immediately. Okay, so when these changes are applied consistently, you start to see results emerge in a very natural way. Okay, this is the important part. Decisions are made faster, alignment becomes visible, coordination improve, and teams begin to act with more autonomy. For example, in a healthcare organization, improving the way clinical and technical teams coordinated significantly reduces the time required to resolve critical incidents. What is important here is that the improvement did not come from changing the technology. It came from changing how people interacted. At that point, metrics begin to make sense. Flows, the flow stops being an aspiration and becomes a consequence of how the system operates. Okay, so this is for you. Okay. To close, I would like to share something that it's important to me personally. Arte was not created, as I told you, was not created with a commercial objective. Okay, it's totally for free. It's what's created with the intention to help. For example, it was created to help new generation avoid repeating the same mistakes many as of experiencing in transformation initiatives. A mistake that costs time, energy, and sometimes frustration, a lot frustration. The goal is to accelerate learning, reduce unnecessary friction, and provide a clear path forward. That is why this book is available for free. You can download using the QR code. It's totally free, and I'm totally sure that you will use it in many ways for your work. Okay, this is not a trick. This is not trick. Sorry. Well, maybe one. Okay. After reading it, it becomes difficult to look at your organization in the same way again, and I promise. Okay, and the change in perspective is often the first step towards real flow, you know, because in the end, processes define the path, but culture determine the speed. You know that, okay? said, Jack, I have to close that. When you have your design, said Jack Mayer said, when you have your design, you can document, share, implement using standard. Yeah. How we did the nationwide in our DevOps book of year award winning installation. Yeah. And how you, me, no, can do it where you are when you have one design flash deliver. Okay. I will check. I will have, because I don't have more time at this moment, but I will check. I really hope that you are that everything here resonates you, and I invite you to download the book. It's for free. I repeat that. And if you need something from my side, or if you want to talk from many other things, I can I can share you my work. Wait a second. Uh, wait a second. I leave my LinkedIn profile in the chat box if you want to connect. And I really appreciate your time, and I thank you for being here. Okay. I really hope that you enjoyed that session. Thanks, Patrice, and thanks, Jack, and thanks everyone here. Thank you. I really thank you.